Colonel Benjamin Bull Miller had built his entire life around rank. It was stitched into his posture, pressed into the creases of his uniforms, and echoed in the way he spoke to waiters, neighbors, and, most of all, his daughter. Rank was order. Rank was worth. Rank was identity. And for 38 years in the U.S. Army, he had climbed high enough to believe that anyone below him simply didn't matter as much. Especially Sarah. From the moment she chose policy over platoons, memos over medals, he decided she had failed him. Washington is full of people who talk instead of act, he used to say, his voice thick with contempt. Glorified party planners and paper pushers. No backbone. Sarah never argued. She learned early that silence was safer. She earned degrees quietly. Built networks invisibly. Rose steadily while her father stayed frozen in the past, polishing old accolades and retelling the same stories to anyone who would listen. So when Colonel Miller invited her to accompany him to a presidential event, one of his old military connections, he claimed she knew exactly why. It wasn't bonding. It was theater. He wanted her to see real power. To stand beside him while men in uniform snapped to attention, while brass shook hands and photographers flashed. He wanted her to feel small again. Maybe you'll finally understand how the real world works, he said as they drove toward the secured complex outside D.C. This isn't some networking brunch you RSVP to. Sarah watched the gates approach through the tinted windshield. Tall fencing. Armed guards. Layers of security tightening like a held breath. She smiled faintly. The car rolled to a stop at the restricted access lane. A young officer stepped forward. Credentials, sir. Colonel Miller handed over his retired military ID with the confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether a door would open for him. The officer scanned it. Paused. Scanned again. I'm sorry, sir, the officer said carefully. This credential doesn't grant access to this zone. The colonel chuckled. Try again, son. I already did. The silence was small, but sharp. What do you mean it doesn't grant access? Miller snapped. I commanded battalions before you were born. I understand, sir, the officer replied evenly. But this is a restricted federal clearance lane. Retired military IDs are not sufficient. Miller's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. Sarah reached into her clutch. She hadn't spoken a word yet. She handed over a black card. No explanation. No announcement. The officer's posture changed instantly. Yes, ma'am. He scanned it once. The gate lights shifted from red to green. Another officer stepped forward, speaking into his earpiece. We're clear. Ms. Miller is confirmed. A third agent appeared, Secret Service, unmistakable. Good afternoon, Director Miller, he said, nodding respectfully. We've been expecting you. The world stopped moving. Colonel Miller turned slowly. Director, he repeated. Sarah met his eyes calmly. Yes. The Secret Service agent gestured toward the open lane. If you'll follow me, ma'am. We'll escort you directly. And him? Miller demanded. The agent hesitated, just long enough to hurt. Sir, you're welcome to proceed through general visitor screening if you'd like. General. Visitor. Tourist. Colonel Miller stood frozen as vehicles streamed past them, saluting Sarah, not him. Inside the compound, people greeted her by name. Senators paused mid-conversation. Advisors leaned in. Decisions were deferred until she arrived. No one asked her father anything. No one cared who he used to be. At one point, a junior officer tried to direct Miller away from a restricted hallway. I'm with her, he snapped. The officer glanced at Sarah. She gave a polite nod. He can wait here. The hallway door closed. Pocket like useless coins. For the first time in his life, silence didn't feel respectful. It felt humiliating. After the event, Sarah found him exactly where she'd left him. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked small. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "You never told me." She considered him, the man who had dismissed her dreams, mocked her work, and measured her worth against a uniform she never wanted to wear. "You never asked," she replied. They walked toward the exit together, but this time, he followed her. Outside, the gate opened without question. Sarah paused before stepping through. She could have explained everything. Could have comforted him. Could have saved his ego. Instead, she said only this: "You don't need a uniform to command respect." Then she walked away. And for the first time, Colonel Bull Miller understood exactly what he had lost.